Democratic senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, Republican Congressman, Scott Rigell, 2nd District, Virginia Beach, and we're happy to have them. I want to start, gentlemen, by saying thanks for coming on. I got to give 2 quick shout-outs. Number one, Senator, this idea was Sarah Peck's idea, and she wanted me to remind you of that. It was her idea. Great idea. She's doing a fabulous job in the Tim Kaine office. So a big shout-out to Sarah. And also I've got a message here for Tim Kaine for Barry Moore at Haley Buick Auto. Barry wanted me to mention that Senator Kaine is speaking tonight at the Jepson Center for the Virginia War Memorial Educational Foundation event. It's a leadership series that Barry and Haley Buick Auto sponsors, and great to have Senator Kaine there. And Barry wanted to say that he appreciates your being there. He can't make it this evening because his daughter has something up. But that's my intro. Gentlemen, great to have you with us.
Hey, great to be with you, man. And I'm excited about the speech at the War Memorial Education Foundation tonight. And you're right to praise Sarah Peck. I'm going to resign as soon as she wants to run for the United States Senate.
And thank you, John. Good to be with you as well.
All right, we got Scott Rigell with us. Look, I'm going to start with Congressman Rigell because he has been very passionate, as Senator Kaine has been, on the fact that we're sending troops, young women and men, Americans, into battle with no formal declaration, no authorization. Congressman Rigell has often said on our show, this is not the King's Army. You've got to go to Congress and get authorization. Now, Congressman, you've teamed up with the senator, along with Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, Republican. Why hasn't the House of Representatives demanded this president come to Congress and ask for an authorization of war?
John, I'm struggling with that. I met with a senior member of our conference yesterday, one who would be pivotal in this whole discussion. And I walked out of his office, looked at my staff members who were with me, and said, "You see what I'm up against?" And I was glad that they were there, because if I described it, I don't know that they would have fully captured how bad it was. Look, I think men and women are up here trying to do the right thing. That said, there's, I think, a moral ambiguity, if you will, here. I appreciate how Senator Kaine puts it. He said it yesterday in the press conference. Look, I believe this war is illegal, given the fact there's no legal authorization for it. Listen to the clarity of that statement. And I see it the same way. And I pivot off of this statement by Joe Dunford. There are others like it, but this one that our senior uniformed officer gave just last week before the House Armed Services Committee said, "I absolutely believe that a clear and unequivocal statement of support for the men and women that are prosecuting the campaign from their elected officials would be absolutely helpful." You know, you've got the legal aspect. You've got the moral foundation, the clarity of the national will to defeat ISIS. There are multiple reasons to advance this. And I tell you, I'm greatly frustrated with my own party, and I'm working on it to advance it. And I appreciate the work that Tim has been doing consistently on this matter.
Okay, let's go to Senator Tim Kaine on this issue. Senator, there's no one in the country that has been more adamant and articulate in the need to have an AUMF, an authorization for military force in the United States. You've been working on this since I've been on the air, basically, since you got elected and took office in 2013. What's the holdup?
Well, it's pretty simple, John. It's people are afraid to cast a vote about war. You know, this is the most difficult vote that a member of Congress will ever cast, is a vote about war. It is something that is clearly for Congress to do under Article 1. The Madison drafted it that way. As Scott has always said, it's not the King's Army to take the U.S. and put it in a different place where war would not be for the executive, it would be for the legislative body to declare. But over our history, Congress has often wanted to abdicate the responsibility. And so you have executive overreach and you have legislative abdication. And I've had a lot of my colleagues, Scott's frustrated with his colleagues, I'm frustrated with mine. They'd like to hide in the weeds and not vote on the theory that if they don't vote, they won't be held accountable. But we've got 3,600 troops overseas. We've had 11 service members lose their life connected to Operation Inherent Resolve. 5 more have been injured. And if we're making people risk their lives every day, then how much of a risk is it for us to have a debate and vote on something, even something that's politically hard? We shouldn't be making people risk their lives if we're not willing to have a debate and vote and say this mission is in the national interest. I said yesterday, Scott pointed out, I said, this is an illegal war. I think it's a just war. I think it's a necessary war. I think it's a noble war, but it's illegal because there isn't a current legal authorization for it, and Congress ought to fix that.
I think, look, I'm going to say the word. This is a cowardly act by Congress, and you've got to blame, Scott, I'm sorry, Republican leadership, because every time I get one of your colleagues on, I ask the same question, I get gobbledygook answers. You know, they blame Obama. Well, President Obama got on TV Sunday evening and said the same thing. You know what, Senator, the other thing I want you to comment on, and then we'll go to Congressman Rigell, is that part of this process is President Obama would have to come to Congress and lay out a clear strategic plan, what his vision is.
Absolutely.
And then it's going to be voted on up or down. So you can't really blame Obama. You know, people say, oh, he's not doing the right thing or whatever. If he can't come with a clear plan, Congress is not going to give him the authorization. So this is part of the process. Why?
Well, let me jump right into that. I mean, I think there are areas where I do fault the president. You know, he started the bombing campaign in August of 2014. At that time, a U.S. embassy, consulate in Erbil, Iraq, was in jeopardy, and the president can always act unilaterally to protect American lives. He doesn't need a vote of Congress for that. But within a couple of weeks, it had changed to we're on offense now against ISIL. The embassy is safe. At that point, he should have sent an authorization to Congress. He spoke to the nation on September 10, 2014 and said, here's why we're doing what we're doing. But he didn't even send an authorization over to Congress until the middle of February. That was a critical mistake. That's just not what you do to start a war in August and wait 6 months to send an authorization over. So I do fault the president for beginning the war and then not giving his own definition of what the mission would be till February. But now that's been 10 months ago, and it's been crickets over here in Congress. You are right that it's supposed to be a process. The president is supposed to lay out a strategy with an authorization connected to it, and then we have hearings and we pepper the administration's witnesses with questions, we challenge them, and then we usually in the past, we would pass an authorization, usually not exactly what the president requested. President Bush presented an authorization after the attack on 9/11. Congress didn't pass that one. They had hearings and they amended it. President Obama sought an authorization after Assad used chemical weapons. We granted one in the Foreign Relations Committee, but it wasn't the one that he asked for. We edited it. We've just skipped the whole debate where the president is forced to lay out a strategy and then Congress peppers him with questions and amends and revises it. So no wonder now, 17 months in, people aren't happy with the strategy. We've never had the debate about the strategy, and you probably remember this, John. Caspar Weinberger gave this famous speech in the 80s, the Weinberger Doctrine. He summarized the lessons learned from Vietnam, and one of the things, he had 6 lessons that we should always follow before committing military force in a battle, and one of the lessons was get the clarity about the mission and its purpose set at the beginning. You know, don't wait till later. And one of the other principles is don't commit American troops unless you are sure you have the support of Congress and the American public. We skipped both of those steps by not having the debate here in Congress till now.
Look, it's absolutely outrageous, Senator, no question. I want to get to Congressman Scott Rigell, Republican from Virginia Beach. Look, Congressman, what I'm going to say right now is going to drive you bananas, but I hear from my listeners every day, they have really lost confidence in Republican leadership. That is driving Donald Trump's ascension. That's why I believe he's going to be the nominee. Why can't you just go to Speaker Ryan and say, look, you know, you have to do your job. It's just people
John,
don't understand the whole.
I'll rattle off I'll rattle off essentially in a concise way, what I heard yesterday in the office. One is their rebuttal would be this: this is legal. We're resting upon the 2001 and 2002 authorizations, and those are valid, and they will be essentially into perpetuity. I disagree with that. The second one is that the president, and I think this is a sequential question here, because I think you implied or actually said that, okay, well, the president brings a strategy over to us, then we're going to authorize that. Look, I see them as two separate lanes. They're interconnected, obviously, but the lane that I'm in and the lane that I need to stay in right now is the actual, this is the will of Congress, the will of the American people, that the authorization for the use of force needs to advance, irrespective of what the president is doing on the strategy side. I hold that view. And I think this president and the next president needs that, the authorization. And finally, the outcome. They're fearful of the outcome, John. At least they reference that. They say, what if we go through this debate and we don't get the authorization that we're looking for? And I tell you, we must not fear ISIS, nor must we fear a debate about how to defeat ISIS. I always tell people, look, maybe I live on this razor's edge of naivete and idealism, but I have confidence in this institution when it comes to wrestling with this matter, with war. And I see my Democratic friends go off when we talk about these things. They're deep, deep discussions. And there is a partisan awful cloud that hangs over all this, but ultimately I think the American people and their representatives in Congress will do the right thing. They're fearful of the process, and I think what Tim has been saying, I've been saying, is there's value in getting on the floor and defending what you believe, and all those C-SPAN hearings. There is some value in that, tremendous value. And look, you go back to Libya. That was an awful end run. The president went to the United Nations, didn't come to Congress. I tried to defund that as a freshman. Didn't get too far. A lot of the establishment didn't vote for me. It was my freshman colleagues at the time that did, and Democrats. And many, many Democrats voted with me when I tried to defund Operation Odyssey Dawn. This needs to be addressed. It is that transfer, that hideous transfer. It's subtle, but it's over time. It's very serious, from the legislative branch over to the executive branch, and we're doing everything we can to get the balance right.
Well, I don't think it's good enough. I think what people are looking for is for House members and Republican leadership to do their job, which is basically figure this out, get President Obama in there, do exactly what you've said. Right now, what we're seeing in Republican leadership, as far as, I'm just going to call it out. This is feckless. This is cowardly. And at the end of the day, Congressman, as Senator Tim Kaine said a few moments ago, they don't want to have to hit the green button or the red button. And, there's something the matter with that.
Well, John, let me jump in and say the blame isn't here just on the Republican side. As much as I wish it were, the Democratic leadership has had the same position. This all started in an interesting way. In June of 2014, the Republican and Democratic leaders, the four, went to talk to the president about ISIL, and they came out and they went to a microphone and they said, "We think the president has all the power he needs, and he doesn't need to come to us." They presented this back to us as, we don't want to talk about this before a midterm election. So I wrote my first editorial about ISIL 2 months before the president started the bombing campaign, and it was in the Washington Post. I said, hold on a second, leaders. You got some members out here who have strong opinions about this. The old authorizations don't apply, and we ought to be having a debate about what Congress should do. Of course, ISIL's a threat, but we ought to have a debate first. So the leadership vacuum on this, bluntly, has been equal on both sides, and that's why it was so important to put in an authorization that was bipartisan and bicameral. So Flake and I basically crafted it by talking to all of our colleagues on the Foreign Relations Committee and listening to them and trying to craft an authorization that could get bipartisan support. And what Scott and Peter Welsh of Vermont did yesterday was they made it bipartisan and bicameral. There are other ideas floating out there, but none of them are bipartisan. There's other ideas floating out there, but none of them are bicameral. The leadership doesn't want to have a vote because they kind of want to protect their members from doing something tough. But we're all standing up against leadership and saying, hey, we got a responsibility under Article 1 of the Constitution. And it's not just because it's in the Constitution, it's because it's there for an important reason. Don't force people to risk their lives unless the political class has said this mission's in the national interest.
We've got a minute and a half remaining. We're going to give the final 2 minutes. We're going to give the final word to Congressman Scott Rigell.
Well, as I looked at this, I got out an actual matrix of the different proposals that were out there, and I didn't set out to support Tim's. I just looked at them objectively, and it matched my view of how we ought to prosecute this. What has concerned me here is that the committees of jurisdiction, I think principally foreign affairs, it really ought to come out of that committee. And here I am over on appropriations, and you might even could ask me, well, Scott, why is it taking you this long to come up with an AUMF? Well, I really think it ought to be done by that committee or members of that committee. But in serving this incredible district that Tim also serves, obviously, I think we wake up every day thinking about our men and women in uniform and what they deserve. And those words from General Dunford, they never leave me. And I just think we owe them everything we can, our senior leaders, and all the way down to the private going through boot camp, everything that they need to be successful. So, again, I appreciate the Senator's leadership on this. We're going to keep working on it, John, and thank you for having us on and allowing us to talk to an important issue.
No, look, I really appreciate Senator Tim Kaine, Representative House Member Scott Rigell for coming on. I got a text here from Scott Taylor, former Navy SEAL delegate in Virginia Beach, says, agreed, Congressman Rigell and Kaine are great. We have too much weakness in America right now. I'm proud to see Virginia leading. To them, I got about 30 texts in the past 8 seconds. Positive response, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for your leadership on this so important issue. Thank you so much.
All right, have a great one.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.